Explaining football to the friend who's just there for the nachos? Hard. Tailgating from home like a pro with snacks and drinks everyone will love? An easy win. And with Instacart helping deliver the snack time MVPs to your door, you're ready for the game in as fast as 30 minutes. So you never miss a play or lose your seat on the couch or have to go head-to-head for the last chicken wing. Shop Game Day Faves on Instacart and enjoy $0 delivery fees on your first 3 grocery orders. Offer valid for a limited time. Other fees and terms apply.
And welcome back to Scarred for Life, the podcast where we open up old wounds by looking back at the films that scared us as kids. I'm Terry.
And I'm Mary Beth.
And each episode, our special guest brings with them a movie that traumatized them as a child.
This week, our guest is Pascal Plante, the writer and director of the new cyber thriller Red Rooms, which is out now in select theaters and coming to VOD on October 4th. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. It's a good concept. I didn't know the podcast beforehand, but then I was told, like, do you want to take part of that? And I said, hell yeah, because I've been talking a lot about my film, but it's much more fun to talk about other people's films. So I'm always glad to do that.
That's what we hear. That's what
we do
like
hear
doing
that a lot.
too.
It's like it's a nice break from the typical PR interview. But we do cover those bases. So to start off, can you tell our listeners a little bit about Red Rooms?
You can read interviews. No, I'm kidding. So Red Rooms, it's a film where the protagonist is like quote unquote a groupie of a serial killer, like somebody who obsessively follows the case of a fictional serial killer on trial. But the killer in the film operated via Red Rooms, which are basically live cam torture. And so the character gets deeper and deeper into that world, dare I say. And that's roughly what there is to say about it. There's way more to say, but yeah.
Yeah, you don't want to say too much more. It's definitely a movie where you want to be on the journey and don't want to know anything because...
Well, yeah, but it operates as a riddle. Like the character, know nothing really about her. She is revealed to you like an enigma, like you're peeling layers of the onion, like slowly but surely. And it's only in the second half of the movie where you kind of get to understand-ish where she's heading and what her motives are and fantasies and all that. But I still aimed for the film to be this kind of magnetic, hypnotic, labyrinthian narrative where you follow someone and you're not quite sure what's up with that, and then it leads you someplace dark.
So Kellyanne, the main character, is so enigmatic, and I love that the movie keeps us at arm's length with her. I mean, we get a little bit of details from her, and the other groupie that we get introduced with, Clem, there's a little bit there, but it's so there's a lot of times where I'm like, what is the motives? What is she doing? And I love that the movie sort of confronts that aspect of it. And I'm kind of curious, what made you decide to write from this perspective of Kellyanne and the groupies aspect?
Well, there's like a blunt, boring answer to it, which is kind of half the truth, which is we haven't seen that as often, I think. Like we've seen so many films about either the portraits of the killers. There's been a few of those, or the police investigation. And only this year I rewatched M, the Fritz Lang film from 1931, which lays the ground of so many of these films. And it actually does the two exact thing going on at once in parallel, like the investigation and then the portrait of the killer, and they kind of confront. But then I think now more than ever, it was time to reflect about, let's say, like a third component, which is way less studied upon in narrative fiction, even through research. Like there aren't that many, because I basically binge ordered on Amazon all the books I could find about like the women in love with killers and people all of that. And people know of the phenomenon, and yet there aren't that many super in-depth studies. It's just a lot of psychopop, like that's their profile, but then you're like, what's the ground, like what's the basis of these statements? Sometimes I wasn't too sure, but anyway, so the idea the vantage point basically of the film. This came before everything else. This came before it ended up being a cyber thriller. This came before the very online, like terminally online persona of the character and the film by proxy. And so yeah, it just felt like a fresh angle to tackle, but then using that angle to reflect upon the widespread obsession about killers, true crime, just horror in general, I'd say.
Yeah, so yeah, you kind of touched on the amount of books you tried to order for about like the persona that we're following. I'm kind of curious because like there's a lot of technical stuff in this movie about like the dark web and that kind of stuff. Did you dig into that at all, or was it academic, or how? Because like there's a lot of things in there that I was like, this is very specific and very kind of frightening.
No, I didn't go full method with this.
Right.
No. It's like I stayed safe. I tiptoed around it, but then it's also very depressing and dark to tiptoe around, because then like your imagination fills in the blank of stuff you read about but you don't necessarily see, and that actually inspired kind of a few key aesthetics components of the film. What you see, what you don't see, what is only aimed to trigger imagination, all of that boils down to even my MO of doing that research and trying to stay safe and sane in the process. But I mean, I don't have the film is not technophobic. Like I'm pretty geeky, and like technology is awesome. It can also lead to some terrible things, obviously, but like even the dark web, the Tor network in itself, I don't have anything against it. It's just like it's freaking human nature. That's dark. And so that's the kind of that's what I was getting at with this film, I think. Yeah.
Well, and I feel like how it doesn't feel like you're trying to say like the internet is bad. It doesn't feel like that in this movie. It feels more like hey, it's a really weird tool that can be really cool, and like exactly what you just said.
What's powerful tool? Yeah, it's a powerful tool. Like with in Spider-Man, they say with great responsibility, with great power comes great responsibility. I mean, if you are tech savvy and you have these morbid fantasies, like nobody, and you know how to kind of hide your, be kind of a ghost online. Well, then I mean, you can just act up on your wildest fantasies at will, and that's should we not? That's kind of and then I'm sorry, I didn't want to cut you off. Sorry.
Oh no, it was just like, what was I saying?
Yeah,
nope,
that's okay. It. I wasn't sure.
No, it's okay. No, it's totally fine. It fluttered out of my brain, and that's all right. Anyway,
but I had consultants, just to finish maybe on the topic of research. I had people that made me look more intelligent than I am, in the sense that like if I had any questions, I had some key players to go to, all the judiciaire, meaning the courtroom elements, of course, but then the tech element for sure. First thing my tech consultant said is like, why the dark web? Like I would just go on Discord, get people online there, and then do my live stuff. And I'm like, yeah, well, okay, but let's say I really want
that's terrifying that he's just like, yeah, it's that easy. And you're like,
no, I mean, because you can just go on you have the tools on the surface web to do anything. Like he was like, and if you want to see murder, you just, there's Facebook lives of beheadings, and like in drug cartels doing assassinations as an act of intimidation. Like it's pretty. And I kept saying, and it's only really recently that I realized that I was lying the whole time about it, is I kept saying that I didn't see a real human being die, but then that's not true, because I mean, I've seen documentaries with people dead. We've all seen pictures, in the last couple of years, there was this Syrian migrant, like the kid on the beach, for instance, which was like, I think it was the world press photo of the year. So sometimes we actually do need some, like, I guess, gory or I guess life death to stir up empathy. But then the dark side of it is, I think if you are confronted to too much of it, you switch off your empathy, and that's where it becomes murky and dangerous. Anyways, the film talks a bit about all that.
Yeah.
Not depressing at all.
I also have to give a shout out to Juliette. I do not know how to pronounce her last name.
Gariépy, yeah.
She I saw her, and I don't remember her specifically, but she was in You Can Live Forever, and that, so I was like, why does she look so familiar? And I saw that she was in that movie. It's like, okay, that makes sense, because I
Mhm.
saw that, I believe, at Sundance. And she's phenomenal in this. There's a coldness and a calculatingness, but also she's very attractive as playing a model, but like there's this kind of coldness to her that she
Mhm.
keeps everyone at an arm's length. And
Yeah.
she's fantastic. What was it like working with her to kind of create this
But okay,
character?
but also she's the nicest person, because when I interviewed you
Yeah,
guys, she's
that's it,
like the
huh?
warmest human being, and I
Is
was
she
like, this
really?
is I just was like,
Yeah.
so it was so funny, because I was like, you're
Yeah.
so different than that
Yeah, when
character
people
that
meet
it was
her,
kind of
like,
wild.
and it was especially a shock, doing Q&As with her when I was when she because at first she traveled around with us. She was, and then people just spent 2 hours with this super dark, scary character, and then like she's just the most Gen
She's like,
Z, expensive, like
ah!
bubbly person, and people are like, okay, yeah, she's a good actress, huh?
She's so intense in this.
She's so scary, but
and
like
it's
incredible.
and it's a very physical role. So
Yeah.
she keeps saying in interviews and stuff that learning to play squash helped her get closer to Kellyanne, because there's something about very lonely, but also there's this whole motif in the film about like glass cages, and there's
Mhm.
something very calculated about the squash, the way it hits, the way it rebounds, the way. So it's very Cartesian, like Cartesian. Is that a word? You understand what I mean?
Uh,
Like very
like
Oh,
mathematical.
cathartic.
mm,
No, not cathartic. I meant like mathematical. There's
Oh,
something
yeah.
very
Cartesian?
Cartesian
Yeah,
is a
sure.
word in French. Maybe
Yeah,
maybe it's like
yeah.
even fancier in English. But yeah, and but yeah, but no, it just goes to your point where the work with her was well, for me when I work with actors, actresses, I don't overly direct them, in the sense that they're intelligent. Of course, I do casting. That's the biggest power, let's say, I have, is in choosing the person. But then I would kind of be stupid to try to control them like puppets, because then I would prevent them to propose something that is maybe even better than what I've envisioned, So
Mhm.
I have this tendency where I'm always there if they have questions, but I let them do their homework. Maybe I'll do a playlist of music for them. Maybe I'll recommend a few books, a few movies, but then they do their actors' homework. And then on set, even doing the staging and the tech rehearsals, I don't want them to act. Like, I just want them to go mechanically through it. But then take one is where magic happens, and I can even be surprised at my own film, because they are the one proposing, and that kind of kills my. It's a trendy trope, but like my male gaze, even like it's just somehow like I start from them, they don't start from me, and I think it helps in the finished film, but also they're even more participative and artistic in their approach to the material. But then if their proposal doesn't quite work, well, I can always lean on maybe my
Yeah.
preconceived notions. But then but they propose a lot in shaping these characters. But for her specifically, Juliette, it was kind of because it's very hard to play stillness, but in a magnetic and inviting way for the audience, where
Yeah.
stillness is not just kind of keeping you, because you said she keeps you at the distance. Yes, of course, but then I also want us to be very curious about her, so
Oh,
we're
absolutely.
somehow invited, and or at least we want to peek in her environment and everything she does. We want to give meaning to every single thing she does. So it ends up being very like you study her with a microscope even, and it's like every single little thing adds to the what your comprehension of the character, because I don't like backstories. We didn't give backstories. Even talking with the actors, I was like, no,
Oh,
you're not
okay,
like that
cool.
because of a trauma. Like, let's cut the bullshit. Like, you're like that because whatever. Like, we're
Yeah.
whatever, we do what we do, and we have to deal with that, which is way more complex as a conversation than saying like, oh, that person played violent video games, or
Yeah.
you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
bit of all that, and but understanding how stillness and micro details mattered for that kind of film and that kind of character. So very physical.
Yeah, well,
Mm.
when you said stillness, I got this image because she reminds me of like a shark, where a shark can just sort of like glide through, and then all of a sudden
Yeah,
there's like
yeah.
violence and interaction. So like that
I like
stillness, I
shark.
think I
I
was.
I like shark. I said once reptilian, like
Ah,
when she looks at Clementine, I
Oh,
was like,
yeah.
look at her like you're a
Yeah.
reptile, studying your subject before maybe pouncing on
yes.
on. So you said shark. I had other animals in mind, but you're not far from yeah.
Ah,
Hell
that's
yeah.
fantastic.
So let's go back a little bit. How did you get introduced to kind of the genre, horror, thriller, that kind of thing? How old were you?
Uh, I mean, regular cinephile kind of step-by-step process here. Like
Okay.
I was not someone who like because I have friends, for instance, who watch like horror films way too young and that like messed them up and stuff. Like I think
Yeah.
it was a kind of a normal-ish. I
Okay.
remember seeing Coppola's Dracula way too young at TV because it's a 1991 film, and yeah, I could have picked this one even because and even the intro scene with like people being impaled, and it's like very
Yeah, that's
chiaroscuro, like backlit and like
yeah.
silhouette, and I
Hmm.
remember like it was like oh, but then I saw it was like an 18 plus film. You know, the first time. I don't know how your rating system works, but I kind of know, but in Quebec, it's very much like the age and plus. And I
Yeah.
remember being really young and seeing the red tag with like an 18 plus in front of Bram Stoker's Dracula, which it doesn't need to be 18 plus, by the way. Like it's a 14 plus film ish, but I
You
don't.
think
But
there's a lot of titties in that movie, I will
oh
say.
yeah, maybe that's
It's
why. No,
pretty sexy.
yeah,
Like it's not that violent, but it's like
you're
very
right.
horny. It's very,
Yeah,
very horny.
as any vampire film should be. So
I
you're
I
mean,
right.
guess.
exactly,
Yeah, yeah,
exactly,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah,
exactly.
you're right. So I didn't get to those parts because yeah, that would have been interesting. But yeah, but no, so maybe like glimpses here and there, but kind of a regular step by step. And like, and
Okay.
also I'm born in '88, so growing up, it was a lot of let's say 80s film reruns on TV, but like the 80s
Okay.
film, because I saw the list that because the press relationist sent us a list of the films that some of your guests talked about, and there were a few that actually also yeah, like the Never Ending Story, for instance. There are scenes in that like scar you
Yeah.
pretty much pretty bad. And
Yeah.
so these films on TV, of course, like Labyrinth, maybe like all the usual suspects of like a late 80s
Yeah.
kid watching films on TV in the 90s. So a bit of that, but then I think I like genre more than ever, to be honest, because I think
Okay.
during the pandemic I watched even more because I saw my classics. Obviously, I would follow like the canon, and I would see,
Mm.
it's kind of the IMDb approved rabbit hole of like watching The
Yeah.
Shining, watching as a young cinephile, but not digging into like the like the Corman stuff or like the like
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
the other layer of the, I guess, cheaper, but in cheaper not being an insult at all, like
Yeah.
Right.
but
No,
you don't
absolutely.
just, yeah, of course you have to dig for them, which is nice. Like you don't just stumble accidentally on Cannibal Holocaust. Like you have to
No.
dig this
Yeah.
fucker up and then like and
Yep.
sit through it, you know what I mean? And so at one point you get there, but then yeah, it started with the more obvious ones. My favorites one tended to be more on the psychological side of horror. Like if I were
Okay.
Okay.
to name one, I mean, I know it's not maybe a popular director to talk about right now, but like Rosemary's Baby is like the best, I think, horror
Yeah.
film
Rosemary's
ever.
Baby is fantastic. It's so
It
It's
good.
just,
is.
and it's because
It's a
it's rooted
classic
in such a
movie.
strong lead performance. Like you relate to her. And I think
Yep.
I learned from maybe this that the vehicle, because horror films where characters are dumb, this is weird. This is fucked what it does to your empathy that I was talking about. Because in some films, you find these characters so dumb that you almost wish them to die, and in real
Mm.
life, you would never do that. You would never wish harm on anyone. I would never. But then, like in the film, like buddies, like the fun is like to guess which one of these assholes will
Yes.
die next, and you're like,
Yeah.
that's not the kind of horror that I tend to prefer, and yet, I mean, it can be dumb fun, and I can enjoy it, but yeah, the lineage of Rosemary's Baby, and then leading to like I love those like 40s to 60s ghost house films. Like The Innocents is a masterpiece, like a
Hmm.
complete utter masterpiece. But even like earlier ones than that, like even films that aren't as good, but like I still have so much fun, like a film like The Uninvited, like a film from the 40s. There's always this medium scene, like the psychic medium.
Yep.
I love those scenes. Like whenever there's a psychic medium scene in a film, like I'm that's always the best scene in the film, by the way. Like it's whenever there's a psychic scene, it's like it eats the whole film up. And yeah, so maybe I should do a film about just mediums.
I was gonna say, well, it sounds like it's your next movie.
Yeah. But then, so yeah, a kind of long-winded answer to say that like it's because my love of film is very horizontal. Like I would watch Tarkovsky film and Bergman film and Scorsese film and all, the usual ones, and then pick the more prestige horror on the side. But I think now, and especially during the pandemic, like I was drawn more to like BZ movies and like just super even gorier, but like more dumber sometimes film, and just more expressionistic, more fun, like genre films that are all about I don't know, like it's flashy use of color or flashy use of or just or cheesy storyline and whatever. Like I would find love in that more than ever, I'd say, in the last few years. And sorry, I don't want to talk too much. I feel like I'm talking too much,
No, you're great.
But it's fun. Also, I think we're in an old golden age of genre films, because I think now more than ever, the audience wants filmmakers to be bold and singular and have audacity to the film. Like I really think the recipe, like the copy pasted recipe, is just not good enough. Like we crave weird, and whereas I don't think in comedies and dramas, like weird is like, it just means like the film is gonna sink and tank and not gonna make any money. Whereas in horror, there's this kind of weird zone where weird can work, and that's actually amazing. So I think it's kind of like a golden age these days, because it's the best audience. The audience wishes for more adventurous films, and so the filmmakers give them what they want. And that's really my mindset going into Red Rooms. Like I can flex my artistic muscles here. Like I can play with music, sound, rhythm, image. If I want to go full Suspiria at the end, I can. It's just you can play with the rules, break the rules, play with the rules again. Just go kind of batch crazy with the language, and that's what's fun.
We have seen a whole lot of audacious horror films recently, like from Barbarian and Longlegs and Cuckoo. Like there's a lot that are coming out that I think, to your point, are kind of pushing the boundaries of weirdness and like kind of holding your disbelief back to like appreciate the journey that you're on. And I'm enjoying that we're in this like renaissance of like let's we've had a lot of like the indie horror, the kind of elevated quote unquote horror. Like let's get back to like some of that more adventurous stuff. I'm happy that we're living that.
Yeah, and atmosphere, like with a good sense of atmosphere too. That always, because if you pull off a good atmospheric psychological horror, like you need to understand the cinema language in its purest form, like how it affects the psyche of your audience. That's very fun to play with, and but also talking about the filmmakers, and of course during the interviews talking about Red Rooms and its inspiration, I had to talk a bit about Haneke, because he's doing horror films in a very unique way. Like Funny Games is, even some horror fans, they don't know what to do with Funny Games. It's so there's a sense of distress, because the characters react. The psychological consequences of violence is so relatable, and that's very like, it's a hard watch. And him, the guy doing a remake in the US just to like hammer that nail again, it's
so good.
Such a bold move.
I think I watched that for the first time for the podcast, actually, and what a hard watch. It's such his movies are definitely operating on different levels that, as you mentioned, horror fans are like, because I'm a huge horror fan, and this movie makes me uncomfortable.
Exactly. But he is being playful, like he's playing at your expense almost. Like this is what you wish happens, like, but it's not. Like this is. And he basically, like, the kids in Funny Games, they're basically cartoon characters. So it's like this what if situation where there's so much violence when we're being cartoonish, but like, let's put these cartoonish characters that we're used to seeing in horror films, but then have just everyone react as accurately and in a relatable fashion to that. And let's see what happens. And it creates some of the most disturbing psychological horror ever. Yeah, it's just
it really does.
Well, on that note, Pascal, what movie did you bring with you today for us to discuss?
It's not a horror film unless you're 4-year-old, maybe, but like I want to talk about Fantasia. And I hadn't rewatched. Is that how do you haven't? I haven't rewatched Fantasia in like decades, and I did my homework. I rewatched it today actually, and yeah, a lot to unpack here, but
yes,
there are three parts of the film. Well, anyway, I'll let you maybe do.
Let me just give the synopsis super quick. If you're not familiar with Fantasia, it's from 1940, so it's been around for a while, y'all. But it's a series of 8 famous pieces of classical music conducted by Leopold Stokowski and interpreted in animation by a Walt Disney's team of artists.
Yeah. So take us back. You were saying, you were starting to say about that there's 3 pieces, but take us back to the first time watching it. How old were you? How did you see this? Like, why is this your Scarred for Life pick?
Well, it just because maybe I saw it too young, because my dad is my parents, they're both music lovers. My dad, he didn't do it as a living, but he also as a hobby, but he did it at a very good level. But he also sang opera, so he's also into classical music. But he didn't have like a career just doing that. But he also, at a certain level, that's what he did. But also, I think it goes even back more than that, because my grandmother on my father's side, who deceased when she was only 64 years old, so when I was young, so I knew her. I have vivid memories of my paternal grandmother, but still, she died fairly young of cancer, and but she's the generation of women where by all accounts, she potentially could have had a legit opera singing career. But obviously, by being a woman of her time, and she chose, I guess, family and children, and that's kind of a tragedy, just losing like the talent and the passion. But long story, and maybe oversharing, to say that they were really into classical music, so it felt like almost how as a parent or grandparent, if you love something, you would just like want to share ASAP to a very young child or grandchild. And so I think it's via just the love of music. But then it's some of these are pretty rough, like the last part, which we're going to talk about maybe a bit more, like that, if you see it at 3-year-old, for instance, like that's a massive charge of dark energy, and that's amazing. But it's also just super old memories of being at my grandmother's and just watching it on her TV. I think, and Fantasia is amazing because, like you mentioned, it's 8 kind of shorts linked with there's like an MC in the orchestra, and sometimes he introduces the part, sometimes not really, but then it actually works well for like a young child's attention span, because you could just watch maybe a 15-minute part, or I think the longest one is the Rite of Springs one, which is that's amazing, but that's maybe 25 minutes. So, but even 25 minutes, like that's within the attention span that you can sustain, of course, at 3, 4, 5-year-old. So yeah, long story to say that I think at my grandmother's watching it, 2 parts, and I always thought the first part was the Mickey Mouse one, because I think whenever they wanted me to watch Fantasia, they would just start there. Like, I don't think, because the first is very, because I rewatched it today and I was like, of course I remember them, but they really, like, I'm pretty sure like I watched the other ones maybe 5 times and these ones maybe once, and I just think they started with Mickey Mouse and then maybe let the film running from there.
Was it Night on Bald Mountain that like really kind of terrified you, or was it were there things throughout that kind of grabbed your attention?
Well, Of course, the Night on Bald Mountain, so the last part is the one. But even the Sorcerer's Apprentice, like let's go in the order of the film, like the three parts, and it's the three parts that that's, let's say, scarred, if I want to use again the keyword here, but like that yeah, me the most. But they're also, I think, to this day, even me watching it at 35. Am I 36 now? Yeah, I had my birthday. So yeah, 36. At 36, they are still the three ones that I prefer. So maybe what ends up having the most impact on you, it still somehow does, even decades later. But yeah, so the Sorcerer's Apprentice, because I think it operates in the way of a nightmare. You know, in a nightmare, sometimes when something goes wrong and then it goes very wrong and then you can't stop it and it goes even wrong and more wrong and more wrong. And then, and that's very much what happens. There's this Mickey Mouse plays around with the sorcerer's hat. He's kind of lazy, he conjures up this ballet, how do you call it? A broom? Yeah, this broom.
A broom.
Yeah.
Yeah, broom presence. But then, yeah, they just multiply, and then there's water everywhere, and yeah, and I don't know, like you relate to that, because I think even as early as a 3, 4, 5-year-old, we do make nightmares, and I think are still like that's how, as early as that, maybe that's how nightmare function. Like you just situations get out of hand, you can't control what's up and where it's going to lead, and just the sense of losing control. And that's had a big impact, and still, again, and now watching it again this year, a few things struck me. The quality of the animation, of course, like just the water.
Gorgeous.
Yeah.
It's gorgeous, but it must be very painstaking to animate water, and that's basically it all functions. That's the device of the whole story is based around water. And so I was like, oh my god, it must be. But then water, it becomes very hypnotic and almost experimental, the way these shapes function. So you have Mickey Mouse that's meeting kind of a Norman McLaren-y experimental, just like movement on film and with animation. That's very, very fascinating. And what else? And just the perfect synchronicity of it's just music and image. The way they feed off each other is like perfect. And you've mentioned that these are 8 pieces of music that are super popular that they're using, but maybe this one was the one that was actually popularized by the film. All the other ones were extremely popular even before, but that's like from Paul Dukas, The Sorcerer's Apprentice, the piece. And like, unless I'm mistaken, but I don't think I'm that mistaken, but like I don't think it's that within like the canon of like the masterpieces of classical music, but it is such a perfect fit in this film that it had like such a big cultural impact that I mean it became synonymous with Mickey Mouse and the brooms and the water, and it functions so flawlessly.
So I thought this whole movie, so when I was a kid, I thought this whole movie was about Mickey Mouse as the Sorcerer's Apprentice. Like I truly thought it was the whole thing. And so when I watched it for the first time, I was like, what are all these like? Because again, the first 2 are like pretty experimental. It's just like a lot of colors and shapes. And and I remember not really watching it, but just being like, okay, and like playing through it, and then kind of coming into consciousness when Mickey Mouse came on the screen being like,
of course.
So it wasn't even like my family ever started it with Mickey Mouse, but my brain didn't really click in until Mickey Mouse came on the screen. Because I was just like,
or maybe that's exactly how I also perceived it. Maybe they started from the beginning, and just because when you're a child, maybe like just seeing, because that's these acid trips, they make sense when you're older, and you can value them and find them. I found them very interesting, these 2 first parts. Then, but I think as a child, you just don't freaking care.
No, well, you don't, because you're like, when I watch movies, like I know there's a storyline and like an A to B and like dialogue, and when you're shown that's just like colors and flashing, especially when you're at an age where like I'm not a baby anymore, like I want a full story. You don't register it as a movie. And now, like, now that we're all like big movie people and can appreciate experimental, cool animation, we're watching this like, wow, cool, look at this. But like, again, when we're younger, we're like, Mickey Mouse, I get it. Like I'm in the movie now. It's a Disney movie. I understand it.
And
exactly. Like that. So watching this again, it just made me laugh to think like Oh, that's why it's hard for me to remember a lot of Fantasia because I didn't ever click in
Mm.
until I saw something I recognized. And
Of
like,
course, you tune in and you tune out. Yeah, of
yeah,
course.
and
Yeah.
it felt like an actual movie.
Or within these first two, like I remember the mushrooms for some strange reasons. Like
Me
Yeah,
there's in
too.
the Nutcracker suite, there's like the mushrooms bowing, and maybe because at this
yeah.
time in the movie, it's the first time we have kind of faces to cling on to. There's like I
Yep.
think
Mhm.
there's the Tinkerbell character, but she's always kind of drawn from afar. Like you don't really get facial. You don't you know how children we relate to like emotional like the faces and the eyes and
Oh
They're a
yeah.
little
so
amorphous. Like
yeah.
they're sort of just they're there and you can see
Hmm.
them, but like they don't really have like human qualities. And it's I
Yeah.
agree, those the mushrooms is
Yeah,
the first
right,
time it's
right.
like, oh, these feel like real characters,
Yeah,
whereas the
yeah.
fairy is floating on the screen and yes, there's a form there, but it's not as
Hmm.
easily uh, perceived, I guess,
Hmm.
as the very painstakingly animated mushrooms that are bowing and doing some all this really cool stuff. I
Yeah.
agree with you there.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
thought it was Alice. I think I thought that I remember watching this and rewatching it this time, being like, I thought parts of this were Alice in Wonderland because I
Hmm.
think because of
Yeah.
like the faces, I would used to I remember conflating some of the things from this part of Fantasia with Alice in Wonderland, especially when she's in the garden with all the flowers, because I think they're
Mm-hmm.
pretty close, and like in my young brain. For
Mm,
like, not there could not be two movies with animated flowers, that it could only be one. So I remember getting those confused in my head
of course.
growing up.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it's also, and when we're young, we watch a lot of films back to back, and I don't know, like so.
Oh
So of
yeah.
course they would blur, but yeah. But for some reason, Fantasia, I watched it often, and this was like, because it's pre-internet and just like putting a tablet in front of children. But then of course, like
Yeah.
putting them like in you open your VHS, those big thick Disney VHS,
Big,
like. Yeah,
yes.
yeah, yeah, that you're gonna hurt yourself with because they were like kind of a softer. I don't know.
And
I
they'd
love
all
those.
come in like clamshells. Like the
Yeah,
Disney movies would come in the kind of the clamshell cases.
Oh
They were
yeah,
big,
yeah,
yes.
yeah, yeah,
thick, thick.
yeah,
Oh
yeah.
Yeah, so
yes.
Mm.
it's so funny, Mary Beth, that you mentioned that you thought that like Fantasia was all about, the Sorcerer's Apprentice, because my introduction to Fantasia was I had my parents had a VHS tape, and I don't know where they got all of these, but it had like a bunch of Disney short films on it. I'm pretty
Mm.
sure it's where I saw the Christmas Carol, Mickey's Christmas Carol. There's some like Halloween ones videos
Mm.
that I saw, and there was The Sorcerer's Apprentice.
Mhm.
And I remember watching that, and I was so in love with The Sorcerer's Apprentice. Like, that was my favorite thing. I was very big
Mhm.
into fantasy as a kid, so like wizards
Mhm.
and stuff. So, like, the idea of Mickey being a wizard, and yes, he's not very good, but he's trying to like, do magic and stuff. I was like, this is
Mhm.
fantastic. And then I remember seeing the cassette or the VHS of Fantasia and being like, because the old tape just had Mickey in his sorcerer's gown, and I was like, "Oh, it's a full movie. I gotta
Mhm.
see this." And so I remember sitting down to watch it when I was a kid and being like, what is this? This is
Yeah,
not
yeah, yeah.
it's not what I thought
That's
it
not
was.
it.
I
Yeah,
was really expecting a whole movie that was just a scene from an entire movie, because I
yeah.
had just had this VHS that had a bunch of little scenes from animated, Disney classics. So
But even I guess I'll go into a bit of Fantasia trivia, but like the Sorcerer's Apprentice was actually it was supposed to be just like a silly symphony cartoon, like a standalone, and because
Oh.
so that's very much like it's as early as I think 1937, so like 3 years
Mhm.
before like the finished like Fantasia version, but and they went way overboard with it. Like it ended up costing way too much. They went very, very ambitious. So they were like, the only way for us to recoup money with this short, with this cartoon, was to make it part of something more grand. And this is where like the whole idea was shaped around that
Oh.
very clip. And not only that, but like the clip with its sole aim was very much like money driven. Like it's just Mickey was not like popular enough, and like they wanted to make a statement, like make a great short with like Mickey in it, and that's just it. And then they were yeah, they just went crazy with it, and they were like, yeah, what do we do? And then they went even crazier and did Fantasia. Yeah.
Wow, so Disney has just always been this way, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, but then it's very like artistic, super artistic. Like I don't,
That's what's so confusing about it.
yeah,
You know what
that's
I
very,
mean?
yeah.
Like it's so
Mhm.
it's like so obviously like capitalism inspired, but then it's also a beautiful piece of artwork and like shows off
Like
the really
we'll
big
get to
talents of the
that.
animators. So you're
Yeah.
just like, well, I can't be mad about it,
Well,
really,
we'll get to that, but
because
like the
damn.
ending with the Ave Maria, like Schubert Ave Maria, after like the whole madness of the
Yeah.
demon, I was just like, this is so beautiful. Like this is art.
Yeah.
Like I don't know how to say it. Like Tarkovsky would be proud of this freaking
Yeah.
bit. You know, it's like with the last shot, super long, like the camera, camera quote unquote, but like just moves forward, and then like there's this. The doors open, and then this, I don't know, this all lit garden, and with the apotheosis of the Ave Maria. I'm like, that's art, Walt.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
art.
You know, it it's funny though that you mentioned that the Sorcerer's Apprentice feels like nightmare, like a nightmare logic and like
Mhm.
a nightmare coming to life, because as a kid I didn't catch any of that. I just loved it. But
Mm,
watching it, I had not seen this since I was a kid. And so when I
mm,
was watching it for prep for this, that whole segment gave me so much anxiety,
mhm,
because it's like it's that little thing that you do something wrong and then it just starts to snowball and it just gets
mhm.
worse and worse and worse, and everything he's trying to do to stop it, like he even takes an axe and murders the
Yeah,
broom. Like that's a
yeah.
very vicious scene. And I was like, oh my gosh, I forgot about that. Like it's shown like a horror film.
And then it goes T2, like, you know, the
Yeah.
Terminator 2, like, when he just shapes back up again. And then, yeah, no, I don't know.
And then all of
But
a sudden
yeah.
there's an army of them from the splinters of the, it's just it's
Yes.
wild. But it's, as an adult I was like, this is giving me so much anxiety. Like I
Yeah,
was
yeah.
sitting there just like itching and like anxious the entire time, which as a kid I was like, this is so cool, I wish I was Mickey. But as an adult I'm like, oh my God, this is horrifying.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. And then, okay, and then so that leads to the very next, which is potentially the best part of the whole film, which is like the evolution of life on Earth. Like, so
Oh
just that, you know, just like Terrence Malick
What
stuff.
the
Yeah,
fuck was
yeah.
this? I was
But
like, do not remember this at all.
no, I remembered only the dinosaurs. I remember how the
yeah, me
dinosaurs,
too.
like I remember the fight between the dinosaurs. I remember the volcano a bit, but then I remember the extension of the dinosaurs. But and it was kind of a blur, but it's such a powerful piece of music. It's freaking Stravinsky's Rite of Spring, and you know the impacts that I remember. You know, just the big, very like dense orchestral impacts with just like the lava bursting. It's very apocalyptic, and then and
It's
he's
very
introducing
violent.
it like, and it's also like 90s 40s, just like going all in with like evolutionary theories, like no second guessing anything, just like here's what science pretty much says, and like deal with it.
Oh, that's such a good point. Like this would not fly nowadays. This is just like so depressing. But
Yeah.
like that, wow, that is so true.
I was taken back by the science of this, and apparently,
Mm.
like, in order to gain a better understanding, they received guidance from the director of the American Museum of Natural History. They brought in a
Mm.
biologist, a paleontologist, an astronomer.
Oh.
Edwin Hubble, the astronomer Edwin Hubble, was brought in, and they brought
Mm.
in
Oh,
iguanas and a
cool.
baby alligator were brought into the studio for them to kind of I guess pull from for the dinosaurs. But like a lot of care went into creating this, and I was surprised watching this. Like it's just there's no talk about religion or anything like that. It's just scientists
Here
said
it
billions
is.
of years
Yeah.
ago, here it is, and here's the Big Bang, and here's history, and here's all of like it was really refreshing, particularly from 1940s, to see this just sort of like presented as fact and not like a, I don't know, both sidesism like thing. You know what I mean?
But yeah, but that's just like peak everything. This 25-minute part with like, yeah, Rite of Spring, dinosaurs, going all the way, like I said, like half jokingly, like going full Tree of Life, Terrence Malick, but like
Yeah.
way ahead of
It
its
basically
time.
is though, to be
I
honest. Like it
mean,
really is.
yeah, it's just so good. I think as a child, you're just like you cling on to a few images, and I think that's also the strength of the Sorcerer's Apprentice. But like the rhythm, like the sync between music, like it's very clear. You understand that as a
Mm-hmm.
child, like how
Yeah.
they interact with each other, and this creates an impact. But I remember, yeah, just by dinosaurs fighting, the T-Rex popping and being like, yay. But now looking at it again, I was to be honest, like really like floored. This is another piece of genius within Fantasia. Not all of them are that good. Like this to me takes the cake. Now with my eyes of a 36. year old.
Yeah, I was
Yeah,
enamored with this segment rewatching it as an adult.
Mhm.
Like as a kid, the only thing that like I was like, I don't remember this until the dinosaurs came. And the
Mhm.
dinosaurs are like, oh, because that T-Rex is so iconic in this that just the that image alone was like, okay, I do remember seeing that. But for the longest time when I was watching, it's like, I don't remember this at all.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah, nope, I don't remember jack shit about that. I don't even remember the dinosaurs. I forgot there are dinosaurs in Fantasia. I was just like, nope, it's only, I literally forgot. I thought it was all fantasy stuff. I was like, oh yeah, it's Mickey Mouse and the centaurs and then a demon. Like that's
Yeah.
all I remembered about
Mm.
Fantasia. I don't think I paid attention as a child at all.
No, yeah. But dinosaurs, they build that bridge between fantasy, because of course, like they
Yeah,
existed and but still they
yeah,
are so mythical, like they're as
Mhm.
mythical
yeah.
when you're a child as a
Oh
demon
God,
might be,
yeah,
you know? So I think
yeah.
it's actually it fits pretty well. Like it bridges the gap, but then yeah, it starts with a shot of the galaxy, and yeah, that's a freaking
But the
badass.
magma is so beautifully
Oh yeah, yeah.
animated. The way,
Yeah.
again, like you're talking about water with the Sorcerer's Apprentice, but again, this animation of just the lava flow. I was just like, oh, cool. I could just watch this for like 15 minutes
Yeah,
and
yeah,
just
yeah, yeah.
like the way that the fluid dynamics of it
Yeah,
all
yeah.
is just like
I, I'll do a few
astonishing.
tests now, like because I have a 5-year-old godson, like nephew, and I'll test a few Fantasia bits here and there and see how he reacts. Because maybe I can see
Oh,
myself through his eyes again.
yeah. Oh,
I'd
that'd
be
be
very
so
curious.
That would be
cool.
Yeah,
so
I'd be
cool.
very curious to see. But and then there's like the intermission, which I mean, shouldn't be an intermission. You just need to keep going,
I
and
Yeah.
like
know.
why is there an intermission? I want more. Yeah.
I had a realization watching this as an adult because I don't think I ever finished this movie. I don't think until yesterday when I sat down to watch Fantasia from start to end that I got to Night at Bald Mountain because
Mm.
for me it was all
You would
about
stop at the
Mickey.
yeah, you would
I would
stop at the
stop. I
intermission.
believe like some of the centaur part like was reminiscent to me, but I don't think I ever got past that. I think my kid mind was like, I'm
Mhm.
done.
Yeah. 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 So I don't know if I don't see myself sitting through more than 2 hours of this in one sitting, but I don't think that's maybe it was the point in the 40s when because it was also traveling as a it was like traveling literally traveling around at first
Mhm.
and it's
Yeah.
also there's another fun fact about Fantasia. It's like the first stereo film basically. And like
Yeah.
stereo sound only became like the norm in
Oh,
the
yeah.
70s, but like they created this whole not the same kind of stereophonic, but still like, and even within like actual recording music records, stereo was not that much of a thing in 1940. So that means like being crafted in the late 30s. That this is very, very, very groundbreaking also on that standpoint. But
Wow.
yeah, yeah, apart from that, I think now I think with home videos, there's no way a child watches it in one sitting. There's just no way.
No,
I,
absolutely not.
I even had
There's
a
no way.
hard time, to be honest, to watch it in
I
one sitting today.
I'll
I
be
did too.
honest. I
I did not
I
watch it in
skipped
one
through a
sitting.
couple of the beginning parts. I was skipping through a little bit. I was like, I don't think this is the thing that terrified Pascal, so I'm gonna skip a little bit because it I was like 2 hours when I first
two
saw it. I was
hours
like, I
and
don't
five
remember it being
minutes.
2 hours long.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I will admit that it's a long movie.
It's a long movie, but if you like, I can see myself curating the best parts. Like you just watch the three we talked about, basically. But well, maybe there's some fun ones with like, yeah, you mentioning or like the tutu and the alligators. Like maybe
Mm,
Oh,
this can be
oh,
fun
obsessed,
also.
obsessed. I remember that. I remember why I was like, I was brought back to that. I was so excited. I
Mhm.
was just
never
like,
saw
oh,
it.
I remember.
Yeah. So
Oh,
so so so
love it.
maybe I'll curate a few. Skip the first two. Start with Mickey. Like get him ready for like the creation of the world and 25 minutes of Rite of Springs, and then go to the demon, and we're gonna go
Yes.
there. Yeah.
So this was my first time watching Night on Bald Mountain. Like I had
Okay.
seen clips
Wow.
of Chernobog like at the mountain, and of course like I know the music. You mentioned Pascal that you like lived in a very musical family. My dad, he was in the Air Force, but he was in the Air
Mm.
Force to play music. So he
Okay.
played piano and trombone, and all that. We had a baby grand piano in my house. Music was like a big part. Like all of this music I grew up listening to because my dad loved classical. He was sort of
Mm-hmm.
stuck in that period. So anything past like the that time period, I never got to listen to as a little kid because
Mm.
that was pretty much my entire life. He would sit on the piano and play a lot of this music, and it just like so. And I think maybe that's why I did not resonate with this as much is because like I listened to that music. My dad played it all the time,
Mm-hmm.
and it was just like a constant thing. So sitting down and watching the movie, I would kind of get a little bit bored with it. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so music was very important. But I this last bit, this connection with Bald Mountain, Night on Bald Mountain, and then Ave Maria, what a stunning way to end this movie.
No, it's amazing. It's so good. And I could appreciate this time around just like because it's a study of light and dark. Like
Yeah.
the lighting.
Yes.
Like I remember
Yes.
there's just one point where the demon makes like a pause and there's this big light coming from below, and the way it shapes around like the muscles of like the bear, just like the bare chest of the and the
Hmm.
abs of the
Yeah.
because obviously he has like
Yeah.
badass abs and like what and all that, but like the
Ripped.
way it's like very sculptural, it is so beautiful. And
Yeah.
so the understanding about light sources and shadows, like there's just this part when the hands of the demon, they just super big and go and crawl, kind of looms over the little town at the edge, at the foot of
Yeah.
the mountain, and like, okay, wow, we're like in German expressionism now, and I don't know, but like there's
Yeah.
so many, and also the style of the animation, it's very different. Like the ghosts are kind of in this like 2D,
Yeah.
very but beautiful, gorgeous type of animation.
Yes.
And then you have a more kind of Disney-esque, kind of a layered type of animation. But you have a few things, but really like the quality of the rendition of light and darkness, and it's even tied to the narrative. That's the whole point of the
Hmm.
Yeah.
segment. So I was floored by that sheer technical quality. That's for
I'm really
starters.
mad
Yeah,
that I didn't get to see it as a kid because this would have been absolutely my cup
your
of tea
shit,
with
huh? Yeah,
the
yeah.
shadow, a hand moving across the town, or like the ghost. Like I think what jumped out at me is you mentioned sort of how they're kind of 2D because the whole thing feels very three-dimensional, right? And then you
Mm-hmm.
have these skeletons that seem so flat, and yet I don't know,
Mhm.
it worked so well. And
Mm-hmm.
I love the layering in this. I just
Mm-hmm.
it's such a I would have eaten this up as a kid. And so I am sad that I never got this far into the
Mm-hmm.
movie because it's stunning.
Yeah,
It
It's
is
stunning.
you
stunning.
just need a cool dad to curate the four best parts
Yeah,
in a row, and then
exactly.
an hour you're done, not to an hour and 5 minutes. But yeah, no,
Hell yeah.
and but then going back to maybe what scared me,
Hmm.
it's just so vivid. It's just so like the demon, it feels, because I think the movements are so well rendered. And I listened to, I read a few fun facts about, they used Bela Lugosi to do modeling of like the way the demon, the Chernabog
Oh, did
would
they
move.
really?
Okay,
but
I
they
was
but
wondering because the way his hand moves, I was like, that
yeah,
looks okay. Okay.
but they didn't really like it because he was obviously playing with like the cape and like being fully dressed, and then they got another
Um,
actor to do poses, but like in basically almost naked. So maybe they used a few things about Bela Lugosi, but basically
Ooh.
they ended up replacing even Bela Lugosi to get something else out of it. But just it goes
Wow.
to show that they had a great care into making it extremely relatable. Like, yes, of course, he's like
Yeah.
a demon-like figure, so they could have done anything with it. Like they could have made it, but it feels so. It moves so real. It's so relatable, the way like the hands, the movements, the even down to the facial expressions. So the anthropomorphism of the demon is
Yeah.
so well made that you believe he's there, like you believe he's in the flesh, and even as 2D animation goes, it's very well made, that too. Yeah.
I love that
Mm.
he was ripped. I'm like, Chernobog's a gym bro. Like, I was like, this is it's so funny watching it as an adult because I'm like, man, he's a ripped demon. He's
Yeah.
I'm here for it.
Yeah, but
But
then I mean, I used to draw a lot when I was a child, and my demons were always ripped. So maybe that's the blueprint right there.
There you go.
It makes such a big impact. If you see this guy once, like that's your conception of any real, like any demon, to be honest. Like,
right.
and yes, of course, he's Chernabog, this character recurring within the Disney universe. And yet, again, I think like maybe he's based on something. Of course, he's based on something, but then like that's a new blueprint. And then from this point on, the imagination of so many people went with it, like went with that blueprint as a reference, I think.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm glad you mentioned that, just because I think watching Fantasia, especially this last segment, you can see like especially when the demons are dancing and like the fire, like, you can see the light is casting those big shadows behind them. You see that later in like Lion King and other Disney movies, and you can see how a lot of these techniques are, I think, established in this early movie, and then how that carries on into the rest of the Disney canon. And I think it's really, after seeing how Disney's evolved, but seeing how it really started with Fantasia, where it's one of the first ones, it's
Sure.
kind of interesting just to see how that has been incorporated throughout the entire
Yeah.
filmography so far.
No, the
It's
technique was fully
neat.
formed right off the bat. I mean, like the
Yeah.
first three features were what? Were Snow White, Pinocchio, and this. Like, yeah, I mean, it's
Yeah.
pretty much, you know,
Yeah.
they're
It's
like better
nuts.
than the 90s, like at
Yeah.
least toe to toe with like the 90s stuff. It's at
Oh,
least toe to toe with 90s
absolutely.
stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
Watching this
I
made me miss the animated Disney. Like
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
okay, everyone loves the computer graphics, yada yada yada, but I miss this animation style. I wish we had more of this coming from Disney, because this is like it just reminds me of watching this. And we covered Alice in Wonderland on the podcast, and we covered Pinocchio on the podcast. Just
Mm-hmm.
like seeing that animation, it's like it feels so lifelike and real, and
Mm-hmm.
just so much emotion that I personally feel is lost when we move to computer generated images, for me
Yeah, there are
personally.
great films too. Maybe it's our generation
Yeah,
thing. Maybe because we have an attachment because we were young and watching like Lion Kings and
yeah,
like the
Mhm.
90s Disney were still kind of, again, basically just a cheaper, more refined versions of the late 30s, early 40s Disney, basically. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe we were irrationally attached to it, but
possibly,
I
yeah.
would tend to agree. But maybe it's irrational. Maybe it's just a generation thing. Maybe people who grew up with Frozen were like, oh, maybe in 30, 20 years they'd be like, oh, I miss, this like, I don't know, CG, but like kind of cheaper looking, like the way
Yeah.
Frozen is. Maybe I don't know.
Yeah, because like I mean, Disney was part of my childhood. I mean, I grew up watching
Yeah.
all of those animated movies, from Pinocchio, Snow White. I loved Sleeping Beauty because of Maleficent, Robin Hood, like even the
Mm.
dark
Yeah.
the oh my God, the Black Cauldron, even the Black
Yeah.
Cauldron from the 80s, like all of this was like in my wheelhouse. And I think that you're probably right. That is probably where I get my irrational
No,
desire for more of those animated things.
of course, but and just to tell you that I think it's really globalized. Like he already understood the Disney, like the empire. He really
Yeah.
understood like kind of like the common denominator in every culture, in every, because I'm a francophone from Montreal, and I have the same references as anybody my age. Like it's more about what age, like how old you are the
Yeah.
references you have as a kid, not even your culture. That's how big his empire and like the
Yeah.
appeal is of Disney movies for children, for family movies. This is insane. Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
But and in this part, so there's like fiends and skeletons dancing, and he's like even with these ungodly, unholy figures, like he even has the power of life and death for them. Like he just casually throws them into the abyss and like the fire, and
Yeah.
he's just complete badass. But then of course the light comes, and maybe I tuned it off there as a child, because there's something about children, say, when you're a child with Halloween, but anything, ghosts, zombies, vampires, they're you're drawn towards them because I think you get the sense of danger. You want to flirt with danger even as early as a 3, 4, 5-year-old, and so maybe that's what. But so I didn't get a kick out of the light part, the resolution, the Ave Maria part. Like, to me, that's it. You know, the fun's over, the adrenaline rush is wears out, and that's it. But as an adult, this finale, the light reflecting on the water, you know, the monk-like figures walking with lights, and then just the kind of experimental way the light reflect on the water, and just like with the Ave Maria on
what
top.
the hell? Like, this is the 1940 and they're making this? That's like absolutely astonishing. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, again, I don't remember this from being a child because Ave Maria was a church song. And as soon as I heard Ave Maria, I said, go fuck yourself when I was a child, because I said, I will not be sitting through that. But here, it's just like, damn, okay, that's a gorgeous way to end this movie. Like, what a beautiful transition from like spooky ghouls to this most beautiful processional into the dawn. It's just like, very, also it reminded me of Lord of the Rings, because that's like a point of reference. But it was just like so beautiful and serene, and
it's such a perfect way that I was like watching it again today, was like, I don't want them to fuck it. Like, I don't want to go back to like the MC. I don't want to go back to the orchestra. Like, I wish it just ends there. Like, just have the balls to just finish it, like cut on black after this. And then it does. And then it's like, it's sustained a bit. And then I'm like, okay, yes, all right, it's actually gonna literally finish on this. So he didn't fuck that up. Yeah. So I was glad that he didn't sabotage this perfect ending. Yeah.
Thinking of the structure of Fantasia, though, it because it starts with, you know, we introduce the orchestra, we have like the very kind of light show first segment that kind of focuses on the instrumentation.
Really well made. Like the shadows on the wall, the colors, very well made. Yeah.
It really is. But the movie takes us on like a journey that punctuates it with like bits of horror, bits of like violence. And I think what is so strong, I would not have appreciated this as a kid, but I think what is so strong with the final segment is that it's like, okay, we're gonna get spooky, we're gonna get like a little horror, but at the end of the day, you know, the dawn comes and it's daytime, and we have this as Mary Beth said, religious kind of sound to it, but like it's very bright, and it's sort of like it's saying, okay, we got you a little scared. Now we're going to like ease you out and not leave the lingering image in your head being this demon that is casting a shadow over a town.
But religious, But you said religious, and I'd even add, but not preachy, which is very like, it's very fun. That's like a film that is aimed at the whole family. Like, of course, you might, you know, it might get a bit heavy-handed and preachy potentially, but I think it ages well because it just doesn't go there. And even going back to the scientific, like, just here's the evolution of the planet and the life form on Earth. You know, here's how it is. And so I think thematically for these films, you know, and God knows how many Disney animated didn't age well, like with like
I mean, there was a couple moments in this that I was like, ooh, yeah, this is 1940s.
I can see which one you might point. I can see which ones you might point, but in the grand scheme of things, it is very minor for such a film, and it doesn't get preachy. So I mean, that's what's not to like.
Yeah. Well, do we want to wrap this up and get this a rating out of 5?
Sounds good to me.
Oh, it's all right. I'd go heavy. I'd go hard on this. I'd go 4.5. I'd go 4.5. The maybe 4, but there's the 3 we talked about are 5s. You know, the 3 better ones. So I guess that rounds it down to a 4.5, because, you know, you can just skip a few, like the weaker moments, and just get crazy about the better moments. So 4.5.
Yeah, Terry, what about you? How many Chernobyls out of 5 are you giving Fantasia?
I'm about the same with 4. You know, there are moments that are so fantastic, and there are moments where I, even as an adult, wanted to skip ahead. But I mean, 2 hours of classical music that they are introducing kids to, the talent behind this, like I was looking up, so I was curious how many people worked on this, and apparently
Oh,
more than 1,000 artists and
yeah.
technicians were used in making
Oh,
this. And it features over 500 animated characters. And I'm like, 1940,
oh,
1,000 animators and technicians, 500
wow.
characters. Like, this is going big. Apparently, it has
Yeah.
3,500 feet of multiplane footage, which is more than Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs and
Mm,
Pinocchio combined. Like, the amount
Oh,
of talent that went into making this is just, it's stunning. So I
mhm.
mean, yes, there are moments that I'm like, okay, let's skip ahead. But when it hits hard, it hits hard. So I agree with four. What about you, Mary Beth?
yeah, I would agree with that. I was thinking like I think it's a really interesting kind of experimental piece, but I
Mhm.
think as like a cohesive movie that a child would like to watch, it is not the best. I think again, the ones we talked about and targeted that I have a little bit more of a story to them are definitely the best and are the most memorable. And then you have the rest of them that again are so well crafted. They're amazing. It's just like it feels like a kind of experimental animation reel, which
Mhm.
again, fine. You know what I mean? Like it's I mean it's
Mhm.
cool to see it and I can appreciate it now obviously way more
Mhm.
now that I have an appreciation for animation as a form rather than just looking for Mickey Mouse and
Yeah.
like his dancing broomsticks
So,
for sure.
so how many Chernobyls? You didn't say.
A four,
Oh,
four
okay, cool.
Chernobyls.
But to me, that's what's interesting is just maybe to finish on this, but like the it's kind of like even the Mickey part is like a Trojan horse for something bigger. Like it almost feels
Mhm.
like this is the ultimate film. You can like lure your kid into just watching, consuming something
Yeah,
else, something that might elevate them,
true.
just get them someplace else. And
Yeah.
so it's such a detour. And yeah, you kind of use Mickey to like, yeah, just go to the freaking
Lure them in and
evolution
then,
of life on
yep.
Earth. And why not? You
Oh,
know, so that's also kind of a badass. It's pretty bold, pretty
True.
bold. Yeah.
Honestly, fair. Fair.
yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us to talk about Fantasia. Do you have an online presence? Are you on social media? If so, where can listeners find you? And the floor is yours to plug away at what you can talk about.
Yeah, I'm not big on social media. I'm not on Instagram. I have a personal Facebook, but it's not very like public-y. That being said, it's Letterbox. I have an account down there. I make reviews. I still make I make my reviews in French, but you can always, if you're interested, you can always Google Translate. You'll get the core ideas, and yeah, it's under my name, so very easy to find Pascal Plante
Okay,
on Letterbox. Yeah.
awesome. I will
Awesome.
be following you.
All right, listeners. Well, you've heard from us. We want to hear from you. What was your experience with Fantasia? You can let us know by sending us an email at scarredforlifepodcast@gmail.com, or you can reach out to us directly on social media. I am at MB McAndrews on Twitter and at MB.McAndrews on Instagram.
And I'm at Gaily Dreadful everywhere.
And of course, don't forget to follow the podcast on socials. We are at Scarred Podcast on Twitter and Blue Sky and at Scarred for Life Podcast on Instagram.
And please don't forget to review, rate, and subscribe. And if you want to help support us, we do have a Patreon.
Thank you to Eric Parr for our artwork. Thank you to Sean Keller for our music. Thank you everyone for listening. Please stay safe out there, but most importantly, stay creepy.
And until next time.